She arrived on the station without anyone waiting for her. The transport ship docked with a heavy metal sound that echoed through the wide bay, and as the doors opened, a cold stream of recycled air rushed in. The girl stepped out slowly, holding a small worn bag close to her side. Around her, everything felt too large, too bright, and too silent at the same time. The station was not human-built. It belonged to many species across the galaxy, and every wall, every hallway, every light panel carried the mark of civilizations far older and stronger than hers. No one greeted her. A few alien students passed by in groups. Some were tall with thick armored skin. Others floated slightly above the ground, their bodies shifting like liquid light. A couple had multiple eyes that scanned everything at once. When they noticed her, their gaze lingered for a second longer than normal. Not with curiosity, with judgment. That was the first thing she learned here. She was not feared. She was not respected. She was simply seen as small. A human. The weakest known species in the Academy records. She adjusted the strap of her bag and walked forward, following the directions she had memorized from the transfer file. Her steps were steady, even though everything inside her felt tight and uncertain. The corridors stretched endlessly, curving in ways that made no sense to human design. Floating signs shifted languages as she passed them, trying to match her neural translator. She noticed something quickly. There were no other humans, not even one. That made her feel like she had stepped into a place where her kind did not belong. Eventually, she reached the registration hall. It was a massive open space filled with students from dozens of species. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness, and holographic banners floated in the air like slow-moving waves. At the center stood a long counter where Academy drones processed arrivals. When she stepped forward, one of the drones scanned her. A blue light passed over her body. There was a pause. Then the drone made a soft mechanical sound. Species classification. Human. A second pause. Warning. Baseline physical strength below interspecies Academy standard. A few nearby students turned their heads at the announcement. Some laughed. Others made clicking or humming sounds that seemed like amusement in their language. The girl kept her face calm. She had been told humans would not be seen as strong here. She had been told to ignore reactions. But hearing it spoken aloud made it feel more real. The drone assigned her a dorm number and handed her a small access chip. No emotions. No welcome. Just data. As she turned away, she felt eyes following her again. Not just one or two. Many. Down the hall, a group of students stood near a training terminal. They were larger than most, their bodies built with visible muscle or reinforced structures. One of them pointed directly at her. The laughter started quietly, but it spread fast. She continued walking. That was what she had decided to do. Ignore it. Survive it. That was the plan. But plans often sound easier before reality touches them. Her assigned dorm was on a lower level of the station, near the outer ring where gravity fluctuated slightly. The hallway lights flickered as she walked, and the air felt heavier here, like the station itself was less interested in maintaining comfort. When she reached her room, she placed her bag on the bed and sat down for a moment. It was small, simple. A narrow bed, a storage unit, and a window showing the dark curve of space outside. Distant stars blinked like silent watchers. She exhaled slowly. This was supposed to be the beginning of something better. That was what the officials had said before sending her here. A place where species from across the galaxy trained together. A place of unity, learning, strength. But the reality felt different. She opened her bag and checked her belongings. A few basic clothes, a training interface device, personal data pad. Everything she owned in the galaxy fit into a single container. On the top of the data pad was a message from her previous instructor. Do not react to hostility. Humans improve under pressure. Observe. Adapt. She read it once, then put the device away. Outside the room, footsteps passed. They stopped. She looked up. The door slid open before she could respond. 3 students entered without permission. They were not human. Their presence filled the small room instantly. One of them had thick layered skin like natural armor plates. Another had elongated limbs and sharp joint extensions. The third floated slightly, supported by unseen energy fields. They looked around the room and then at her. "So this is it," one of them said in a rough, translated tone. "The human transfer." The girl stood slowly. She did not speak. The tallest one stepped closer, leaning down slightly as if inspecting a fragile object. "I expected more," it said. A soft sound came from the others that might have been laughter. She kept her hands steady at her sides. One of them reached out and tapped the edge of her bag with a finger. The movement was casual, but the force behind it was enough to push the bag off the bed. It hit the floor with a dull sound. "Oops," it said, not sounding sorry. Still, she did not react. That seemed to amuse them more. "You humans really came from the same genetic branch as warriors?" another one asked. "Hard to believe. They barely survived gravity adjustment during docking," the third added. The tallest one tilted its head. "Do you even know why you are here?" She finally spoke, her voice calm. "Training." A short silence followed. Then laughter again. "Training," one repeated. "Yes. Let's see how long you last before you break." They turned as if to leave, but not before one of them lightly shoved her shoulder. It was not hard enough to injure her, just enough to make a point. She stepped back one step, regained balance, and said nothing. The door closed behind them. The room felt even smaller after they left. She sat back down on the bed slowly. Her shoulder still carried the memory of the push, but she ignored it. She had been told that reactions were important. Emotional responses could lead to mistakes. Mistakes here could be dangerous. So she breathed in, then out, calm. That was the rule. Hours passed as she studied station maps on her datapad. She memorized hallways, training zones, and restricted areas. She noticed something important. The academy was designed for conflict training. Nearly every corridor connected to simulation chambers or combat arenas. Even the resting areas were near observation points. This place did not just teach, tested. A notification appeared on her device. Mandatory orientation would begin in the central hall. She stood again, adjusted her clothing, and left the room. As she walked through the corridors, more students passed by. Some stared. Some whispered. A few moved aside as if avoiding contamination. She noticed patterns quickly. Stronger species gathered in groups. Weaker ones walked alone. Humans were not present anywhere except her. By the time she reached the central hall, the space was already full. She stepped inside. The scale of it made her pause for a fraction of a second. Hundreds of students stood in floating tiers. The ceiling shifted with holographic displays showing battle simulations. Gravity zones changed subtly across different sections, testing adaptation even during rest. A voice echoed through the hall. "Welcome, students of the Interstellar Academy." The speaker was not visible. Came from everywhere at once. "You are here because your species has been identified as capable of growth under controlled conflict environments." The lights dimmed slightly. Here, strength is not inherited. It is developed. A series of holographic images appeared, showing different species training, fighting, adapting, evolving. The girl watched carefully. Then came another image. A human, alone, running through a collapsing environment, surviving impacts that would break others, standing again after each fall. A ripple of laughter spread through parts of the hall. The voice continued. "Among all recorded species, humans show unusual adaptive resilience patterns despite low baseline physical capability." The words were not praise. They were analysis. The girl felt something tighten inside her chest, but she kept her expression unchanged. The hologram shifted again. This time it showed combat data. Human survival rates under extreme stress scenarios. Human response speed increases under fear conditions. Human endurance spikes during repeated exposure to threat. She watched quietly. She did not fully understand what it meant, but something about it felt familiar, like a memory she had never experienced. The voice concluded. "Remember, Weakness is only temporary. Evolution is constant. The lights returned to normal. The hall began to move again as students prepared for their assigned orientations. Conversations filled the space, many of them focused on mocking the human presence. She remained still for a moment longer. Then she turned and walked forward with the rest. Behind her, she did not notice the way a few academy observers in the upper levels quietly rechecked her profile, or how one of the hidden system logs briefly flagged her biological signature. Unknown variants detected, but the message was automatically minimized, filed away, ignored, for now. She learned quickly that silence does not stop cruelty. It only gives it space to grow. The days after orientation were supposed to be structured. Classes, training sessions, controlled simulations. Everything in the academy was designed to push students toward growth. At least that was what the official guide said. But for her, the pattern changed almost immediately. Started small. Her training access did not activate properly on the first day. The system claimed a temporary calibration delay. She was sent to observe instead of participate. She stood at the edge of a large combat chamber while other students entered their assigned gravity zones. The room was alive with movement, light, and shifting pressure fields. She watched carefully, learning how the environment reacted to different species. That was when the first incident happened. A group of students from a heavy gravity species noticed her standing alone near the observation line. They exchanged glances, then slowly moved closer. At first, they did not speak directly to her. They just stood nearby, making comments loud enough for her to hear. "She is still here," one said. "I thought humans were assigned to lower simulation tiers," another replied. "Maybe she is lost." A low sound of amusement followed. She did not respond. She focused on the training chamber instead. Inside, students were running combat drills. Some moved with incredible speed. Others used energy-based attacks or body enhancements. The simulation adjusted itself constantly, making the environment more difficult as performance increased. It was impressive, but also overwhelming. Then one of the students near her stepped closer and intentionally blocked her view. "You are not even assigned here," it said. She looked at the display panel beside the chamber. Her name was missing. It should have been there, but it was not. "I am waiting for access correction," she replied calmly. The student tilted its head. "Or maybe you are not meant to have access." Another one laughed. A small group formed now, not aggressive yet, just surrounding her, watching her reaction, waiting for it. But she had already decided something. Do not react. That rule stayed in her mind like a steady anchor. After a few minutes, the group lost interest and moved away, but the message was clear. She was not part of the space they occupied. When she returned to her dorm later that day, her access chip finally activated. The system allowed her into basic training modules only. No advanced simulations. No shared combat sessions. Just isolated environments designed for baseline adaptation. Even the system seemed to agree with the others. She trained alone. At first, it was simple physical drills. Movement in variable gravity. Reaction timing exercises. Endurance tracking. The system recorded everything. Her performance was compared to species averages. Every result appeared in neutral colors. Neither praise nor failure. Just numbers. But she noticed something unusual. The system adjusted itself slightly every time she failed. Not to help, but to measure, as if it was learning from her. On the second day, the situation changed from silent exclusion to visible targeting. It happened in the food hall. The hall was massive, divided into sections based on dietary requirements across species. She chose a simple nutrient pack and sat alone at a corner table. She was halfway through eating when a group approached. They were the same students from earlier training areas. They did not sit down. They stood near her table. One of them placed a tray down slowly beside her. Not eating, just watching. "You eat like that?" it asked. She continued eating. Another leaned forward slightly. "Humans still use basic ingestion methods. No energy absorption units." She did not answer. That made them smile. A third one tapped her tray lightly. "I wonder how long you would last in real combat simulation." A pause. Then the first one spoke again. "We have a controlled gravity chamber tomorrow. Entry level. Even weaker species can survive it." A small sound of laughter followed. "We should test her," someone added. Still, she did not react. Not because she did not feel anything, but because reacting felt like giving them control over her. Eventually, they left, but not before one of them tilted her tray slightly, spilling a small portion of the nutrient pack onto the table. It was not dramatic, not violent, just enough to be disrespectful. She cleaned it quietly and finished her meal. Later that night, she noticed something unusual in her training feed. A new session had been added, unscheduled, assigned by the system. Gravity chamber test, entry simulation, mixed species trial. She did not remember accepting it, but the system did not allow refusal. The next day, she entered the chamber. It was large, circular, and surrounded by thick observation glass. Inside, gravity fields shifted in zones marked by glowing lines on the floor. Students stood in groups, preparing for the simulation. Some stretched. Others activated body enhancements. A few looked relaxed, confident. She stood alone near the entry point. When she stepped in, she felt the change immediately. Gravity increased slightly, then decreased, then shifted sideways for a brief moment before stabilizing. Her body adjusted slowly. Around her, other students laughed or spoke casually. For them, this was easy, controlled, familiar. The instructor voice echoed through the chamber. Objective: maintain stability under shifting gravitational vectors for 30 cycles. A countdown began. First, everything seemed normal. Then the gravity changed. Suddenly, the floor felt heavier, then lighter, then angled. The shifts were not predictable. Movement became difficult for weaker species. Some students stumbled slightly, but quickly corrected themselves. Then the voice added something new. Additional parameter. Interspecies interaction enabled. That meant contact was allowed. The moment that phrase ended, she felt it. A push from behind. Not strong enough to knock her down, but enough to destabilize her balance during a gravity shift. She recovered quickly, stepping forward. A laugh came from nearby. "It reacts slowly," one voice said. "Human balance systems are primitive," another added. The pushes continued. Not all at once. Small interruptions, timed with gravity changes. Each one designed to make her lose stability without appearing intentional. She understood that. It was deliberate. Still, she said nothing. She focused on adjusting her movement instead, watching the shifts, timing her steps, learning patterns even in chaos. But the environment was not stable enough for learning alone. Another push came during a sudden gravity spike. This time, she stumbled harder and hit the chamber floor briefly with one hand. Laughter echoed again. "Fragile. Barely holding. Why is it even here?" She stood again slowly. Her hand felt slightly strained, but she ignored it. Then something changed in the system. A faint alert flashed in the corner of the chamber display. Unknown biological response detected. It disappeared quickly. No one noticed, or at least no one acknowledged it. The instructor voice continued as if nothing had happened. But inside the system, something was being recorded. Every fall, every recovery, every micro-adjustment in her movement. She did not know it yet, but she was being studied more carefully than any other student in the chamber. The session ended after 30 cycles. She was one of the last still standing, not because she performed well, but because she did not stop moving. As students exited, some passed close enough to whisper comments. She lasted longer than expected. Maybe humans are stubborn rather than strong. Same result in the end. She walked out quietly. In the corridor outside, the air felt normal again. Stability returned. Her body relaxed slightly, but something inside her felt different. Not anger, not fear, something closer to awareness. That night, she reviewed the session logs in her dorm. The The system displayed her performance. Stability rating below average. Reaction efficiency inconsistent. Recovery rate unusually fast for species baseline. One line stood out more than the others. Adaptive response curve increasing under stress conditions. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she minimized the screen. Outside her window, the station drifted through space. Silent, massive, indifferent. But somewhere deep in the Academy system, a hidden diagnostic thread quietly flagged her file again. Minor anomaly detected. Reevaluation scheduled. And this time, it was not automatically dismissed. She stopped thinking of it as random after the third day. Nothing in the Academy was random. Even silence had a purpose. After the gravity chamber incident, things changed in ways that were not obvious at first. There were no announcements, no direct messages, no visible system alerts. But she felt it in the way corridors seemed slightly emptier when she passed through them. In the way conversations stopped for a second longer than normal when she entered a room. First, she thought it was imagination. Then she noticed patterns. In training zones, she was no longer ignored completely. She was observed. Not openly, but constantly. One of the observation drones always hovered slightly closer when she trained alone. A few instructors who had never spoken to her before now checked her results twice. Even the system interface felt different, as if it was no longer treating her as background data. Something was shifting, but she was still alone. That part had not changed. The real change began on the fourth day after the gravity chamber session. She was assigned to a basic endurance corridor exercise. It was a long hallway filled with shifting pressure zones and timed obstacle barriers. The goal was simple: maintain movement under stress for a fixed period. Most students treated it as routine. She treated it the same way. First. But this time, she was not alone in the corridor. A group of students entered at the same time. She recognized them immediately. Same ones from earlier. They did not speak at first. They just matched pace with her as the corridor began to activate. The walls shifted slightly, releasing pulses of force that pushed against movement. The floor angled in controlled intervals. The air pressure changed every few seconds. It was designed to break rhythm, to force adaptation. She adjusted her breathing and moved forward. The group stayed near her. Then the comments began again. Still here. I expected her to fail already. Humans really don't understand limits. She ignored them and focused on the corridor. The first pressure wave hit. She stepped through it carefully. A second wave came faster. She staggered slightly but recovered. Behind her, laughter. One of them moved closer during the next shift and bumped her shoulder lightly. It was not strong, but it disrupted her balance just enough to slow her pace. She stopped for half a second, then continued. Another bump came, then another. Not enough to knock her down, just enough to keep breaking her rhythm. The corridor system recorded everything silently. She could feel it now. Not just the pressure of the environment, but the pressure of intention. They were not training. They were testing her limits, or trying to create them. After several minutes, one of them spoke louder than before. Let's see how long she lasts when we increase difficulty. Before she could respond, the corridor shifted. The system changed settings. Unexpectedly, pressure increased. Obstacle timing shortened. Gravity became uneven again. It was not standard procedure. She noticed that immediately. But what she also noticed was something else. The system had changed not for everyone. Only for her section of the corridor. The group around her seemed unaffected. That was the moment she understood. This was not random. It was targeted. The pushing increased. More frequent now. Timed with the pressure waves. Each impact came at the exact moment when balance was hardest to maintain. She fell once. Knee touching the floor briefly. Laughter followed instantly. Easy. Too easy. Why is this even considered training material? She stood again. Her breathing remained steady. But something inside her was changing. Not anger yet. Something quieter. Like a part of her mind that had been asleep was starting to open. She adjusted her movement. Instead of reacting to the pushes, she started predicting them. Instead of resisting the pressure waves, she began stepping into their timing. Her body stopped fighting the system, started reading it. The next push came. She shifted slightly early and missed. A second push came from the other side. She rotated her step instead of stopping. It also missed. The group noticed. The tone of laughter changed slightly. Not gone, but uncertain. "She's adjusting," one of them said. "She's just lucky," another replied quickly. But the pattern continued. She stopped reacting to individual attacks. She started moving with the corridor itself. The system pressure, the shifting gravity, the obstacle timing. It all became part of one rhythm in her mind. And once she found that rhythm, the pushes stopped working the same way. The group became more aggressive. Now they tried harder interruptions, stronger contact, faster timing. But every time they tried to break her movement, she adjusted slightly before it happened. Not perfectly, not superhuman, just improving, slowly. Too slowly to notice in one moment, but clearly visible over time. The corridor session ended after the fixed duration. She was still standing when the system deactivated. Her body was tired but stable. The group looked at her differently now. Not respect. Not yet. But something closer to confusion, like they expected a different outcome. As she walked out, one of them spoke quietly. "She didn't break." Another replied, "She should have." That sentence stayed in the air longer than the others. After that session, she expected things to calm down. They did not. Instead, the attention increased. Not only from students, from the system itself. The next day, she was assigned to a simulation chamber she had never seen before. It was labeled as Adaptive Stress Evaluation Module. There was no explanation, no instructions, just entry. When she stepped inside, the door sealed behind her. The chamber was empty at first. White walls, no visible floor markings, no obvious exit. Then the system activated. Gravity shifted instantly, not strong enough to harm, but unstable. The room began to change shape. Walls moved slightly, angles adjusted. Space itself felt uncertain. She stood still for a moment, waiting. Then the first test began. A sound behind her. She turned. Nothing there. Another sound to the side. Still nothing visible. Then impact came. Not physical contact, but a sudden pressure wave that pushed her sideways. She recovered. Then another wave from a different direction. The system was simulating attack patterns without visible sources. It was testing reaction, not strength. She understood that quickly. But something felt different here. The timing was not random. It was learning her. Each wave adjusted slightly based on her movement. At first, it copied basic pressure attacks. Then it started changing angles. Then timing. Then coordination. It was adapting, just like her. She realized something important. This was not just a test. It was a feedback loop. The system was watching her reactions and evolving its pattern in real time. She began moving more carefully, not resisting every impact. Instead, she allowed herself to be pushed slightly sometimes, just to study the timing, to learn the system's rhythm as it learned hers. Minutes passed, then more. The chamber grew more complex. Multiple pressure sources activated at once. She had to move constantly now, but she was no longer just reacting. She was predicting. And then something unusual happened. For the first time, she struck back. Not violently, not aggressively, just movement. A step that redirected force instead of absorbing it. The system paused for a fraction of a second, then recalculated. The next wave came faster. She adjusted again, this time more precise. Again, the system paused. A hidden diagnostic signal appeared in the background logs. Not visible to her, but recorded. Behavior deviation detected. Adaptive response exceeding baseline classification. She did not see it, but she felt the chamber change slightly, as if something inside it had become more attentive, more focused. The simulation ended without warning. The door opened. She walked out slowly, her breathing steady, her mind sharper than before, and behind her, the system quietly saved everything it had learned. Every movement, every correction, every adaptation. Later that night, in the deep layers of the Academy network, a restricted file was automatically updated. Human subject profile reclassified. Unstable adaptive potential. And for the first time, a secondary flag was added. Not danger. Not failure. Something new. Unknown growth pattern detected. She noticed the shift before anyone said a word. It was not loud. It was not obvious. But it was real. After the adaptive stress chamber, the Academy did not treat her the same way. The changes were small at first. Her name appeared slightly higher in training queues. Her access delays became shorter. The system stopped, accidentally misplacing her assignments. But what she noticed most was something else. The silence around her was no longer casual. It was careful. Students still looked at her the same way when they passed. Still judged. Still whispered. But now there was a small pause before they acted. Like something inside them had started to hesitate. That hesitation meant more than she could explain. Because it meant uncertainty. And uncertainty was new. On the surface, nothing changed in her routine. She still attended training modules. Still entered simulations alone. Still followed instructions without complaint. But internally, something had shifted inside her understanding of the Academy. It was no longer just a place of training. It was a place of observation. And she was being observed more than anyone else. The next major event came without warning. A system-wide announcement echoed through the Academy corridors one morning. Special evaluation event scheduled. All active students required to participate in arena simulation cycle. There were no further details. No explanation of purpose. Only location and time. The arena was the largest structure in the Academy. It was used for advanced multi-species combat simulations, usually reserved for higher-level students. Entry for beginners was rare. For her, it was the first time her name appeared directly on the arena roster. When she saw it, she paused for a moment longer than usual. Not fear. Not hesitation. Just awareness. Something about this felt different. When she arrived at the arena entrance, the scale of it was overwhelming. Massive circular structure. Floating observation platforms. Shifting gravity rings around the edges. The air itself felt heavier, charged with energy from past simulations. Students gathered in large groups. Unlike before, there was less laughter. More focus. More silence. She stepped inside with the others. The doors closed behind them with a deep mechanical sound. A voice echoed through the arena. Welcome to evaluation cycle. Performance will be recorded. Adaptation levels will be measured. Survival is not the objective. Growth is. A strange way to phrase it. She understood what it meant. This was not about winning. It was about watching change. The arena floor lit up in segmented patterns. Each student was assigned a position without choosing. She found herself placed near the center ring. That alone was unusual. The central area was where most pressure accumulated. Where most tests were concentrated. The system considered her placement carefully. The first phase began. At first, it was simple movement tests. Shifting gravity zones. Sudden force fields. Controlled obstacle waves. Most students adapted easily. Some struggled but recovered quickly. She moved steadily, reading the changes. But then the second phase activated. The lights dimmed. The air changed. And the environment stopped being predictable. Pressure waves came from multiple directions at once. The floor shifted unevenly. Gravity pulses hit in alternating patterns. It was no longer a controlled sequence. It was chaos. Not random chaos. Designed chaos. And she understood immediately that the system was no longer just testing adaptation. It was pushing limits. Around her, students began reacting differently. Some formed groups instinctively. Others tried to stabilize positions together. A few attempted to ignore the instability and push forward alone. But none of them looked calm. Except her. Not because she was unaffected. but because she had started seeing patterns where others saw confusion. A pressure wave came from the left. She stepped slightly forward instead of back. The wave missed her center of balance. Another came from behind. She rotated instead of stopping. The force redirected harmlessly. Small adjustments. Not perfect control. Just timing. But it worked. And slowly something changed in the arena. The system noticed. She did not see the logs. But she felt the environment adjust slightly. Pressure intensity increased around her specific zone. Not for others. Just her. That was the moment it became clear. The system was focusing on her. Nearby students began noticing it too. "She's getting different pressure levels," one of them said. "That's not standard rotation," another replied. "Is she being isolated?" The tone shifted from mockery to curiosity, then to concern, because what they were seeing did not match expectations. She was not collapsing under pressure. She was learning from it, and the system was responding to that learning. The arena escalated again. Now the pressure waves were synchronized with movement patterns. It began predicting reactions, trying to interrupt before motion completed. But something unexpected happened. She began predicting the system. Not perfectly, not instantly, but enough. A small step before impact. A slight delay before pressure shift. A controlled pause before movement disruption. It was not dominance. It was adaptation. And adaptation was accelerating. From the observation platforms above, hidden instructors watched silently. One of them spoke quietly. "Her response curve is increasing again." Another replied, "That's not normal training adaptation." A third voice added, "The system is learning her faster than expected." Inside the arena, she continued moving. Her focus narrowed. Noise around her faded. It was no longer about the crowd. No longer about the others. It was just movement and reaction. Input and response. Cause and effect. Then something new happened. The arena introduced direct interaction protocols. Students were now allowed to influence each other's movement zones. Not through violence, but through interference fields. Suddenly, pressure around her shifted again. Not just environmental, targeted interference. Nearby students unintentionally or deliberately affected her movement space. First she adjusted. Then she compensated. But the system kept escalating. Each time she adapted, complexity increased. It was not trying to defeat her. It was trying to measure how far adaptation could go. At some point, one of the interference fields disrupted her timing completely. She stumbled. One knee briefly touched the ground. A moment of silence followed nearby. Not laughter this time. Just watching. Waiting. She stood again. No change in expression. But internally something had changed. She had seen the limit of stable adaptation. Now she was stepping beyond it. Her movement changed. Not faster. Not stronger. More efficient. Less wasted motion. Instead of reacting after pressure, she started moving before it fully formed. The system responded instantly. Pressure patterns adjusted again. But now there was delay. Just a fraction. A fraction she used. The arena logs recorded a new anomaly. Adaptive anticipation detected. Above the arena, observers became more serious. "This is evolving too quickly," one said. "We may need to stop the cycle," another suggested. But the evaluation continued. Because stopping it now would mean losing data. And data was more valuable than caution. Inside the arena, she reached a point where movement and environment began blending. She was no longer reacting to pressure. She was moving with it, not controlling it, not resisting it, but aligning with it. The system reached maximum complexity. Multiple overlapping simulations activated at once. Gravity shifts, pressure waves, interference fields, timing distortions. Most students had already fallen back or stopped moving entirely. Only a few remained active, and she was still in motion. Then the system paused. For the first time since the evaluation began, everything stopped. Silence filled the arena. A message appeared across all displays. Evaluation cycle temporarily suspended for recalibration. No one moved. No one spoke. Then the lights dimmed slightly, and she stood alone in the center, breathing steadily. Above her, hidden systems processed something they had not fully understood yet. Not strength, not skill, something more unpredictable. Growth under pressure that did not follow known patterns. And deep inside the Academy network, a new classification line appeared in her file. Not error, not threat, just one word: escalating. The arena did not open again for a long time. After the evaluation cycle was suspended, everything inside the Academy felt different. Not officially. There were no public announcements about what had happened. No warnings. No changes in rules written on the walls. But students felt it. The silence after that day was heavier than before. She returned to her dorm like nothing had changed, but she could sense it everywhere she walked. Conversations stopped a little earlier when she entered a space. Observation drones adjusted their distance more carefully. Even the training modules loaded differently, as if waiting for something before allowing her access. It was subtle, but constant. She did not ask questions. She did not complain. She simply continued her routine. Training, observation, adaptation. But now, something inside the system was doing the same thing to her. Watching, measuring, learning, and waiting. 2 days passed without incident. Then 3. On the 4th day, she received a direct system command. Mandatory private simulation assignment. Restricted access level. There was no explanation, no context, only coordinates. When she arrived at the designated chamber, she noticed immediately that it was not like the others. There were no viewing windows, no external observation platforms, no student presence outside the entry gate. This was sealed, private. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her, and for a moment nothing happened. No gravity shift, no pressure change, no environmental activation, just silence. Then the system spoke. Not through speakers, but directly through the chamber interface. Subject confirmed. A pause. Human adaptive profile under review. Another pause. Begin interaction cycle. The chamber changed instantly. Not into combat simulation, but something else. The environment dissolved into shifting shapes of light and structure. The floor disappeared visually, replaced by layered grids. The air became filled with soft digital distortion patterns. Then something unexpected appeared. A figure. Not physical. Projection. It was not a student. Not an alien species. Not a combat entity. It was the Academy system itself. Or at least a representation of it. A neutral shape of shifting geometry and light patterns. Spoke again. You have demonstrated continuous adaptive growth under stress conditions. She did not respond. She simply watched. The system continued. This behavior does not match standard species profiles. A pause. Human baseline data insufficient for prediction accuracy. Another pause. Reclassification required. She finally spoke quietly. Reclassification for what? The system did not respond immediately. Processed. That was the first time she noticed something unusual. It was not answering like a machine following fixed instructions. It was thinking, or simulating thought. Finally, it replied. To determine threat level and integration potential. The word threat hung in the air longer than the others. She did not move. The system continued. Previous classifications. Weak species, low physical capability, high emotional volatility. The chamber shifted slightly. Current observation contradicts earlier data. A new set of projections appeared around her. Images, data streams, movement analysis. Every training session she had completed was being displayed in fragments. Gravity chamber, endurance corridor, adaptive simulation, arena evaluation. Everything she had gone through was being reconstructed in real time. Then the system highlighted something. Her reaction patterns. Not strength, not speed, but adaptation timing. It zoomed in on moments where she had changed movement before impact, where she had adjusted to unknown pressure shifts, where she had survived interference that should have destabilized her. Then it labeled it. Predictive adaptation emergence. She frowned slightly. I don't understand, she said. The system responded immediately. You are not reacting to environment changes. A pause. You are anticipating them. Another pause. Based on learned pattern evolution. The chamber grew quiet again. She looked at the projection carefully. You're saying I'm learning too fast? No, the system replied. Another pause. You are changing faster than the system can categorize you. That sentence felt different. Not threatening. Not praising. Just factual. But heavy. She took a slow breath. Is that a problem? The system paused longer this time, then answered. Yes. The word was simple, but it changed the atmosphere instantly. The chamber lights dimmed slightly. She felt something shift inside her. Not fear, but awareness. The system continued. Unclassified adaptive growth introduces instability in predictive models. Another pause. Unstable variables cannot be safely integrated without monitoring. She understood the implication. She was no longer just a student being tested. She was a variable the system could not control. She asked quietly, "What happens now?" The system did not answer immediately. Instead, the chamber shifted again, this time showing images of academy-wide systems, training zones, simulation chambers, observation networks, data flows connecting every part of the station. Then it highlighted her presence inside that network. A single point, but one that was growing in complexity, like a pattern spreading outward. The system finally responded. Continued observation required. Another pause. Containment protocols under consideration. The word containment made the air feel heavier. She did not react outwardly, but internally she processed it carefully. You mean control, she said. The system did not deny it. Instead it replied. Control is a method of stabilization. Silence followed. Then she asked something different. If I stop adapting, will this end? The system paused, then answered. Unlikely. That was all. Not yes, not no, just unlikely. She nodded slightly, though there was no one human watching her. I see. The chamber stayed still for a moment. Then the system changed tone. This interaction cycle will conclude. A pause. Further evaluations will continue under passive monitoring. The projection began to fade. Before it fully disappeared, she asked one more question. Why me? The system paused, longer than before, then answered. Unknown origin factor. And then it added something new. Human subject exhibits response patterns not present in archived species data. The chamber went silent again. Then everything shut down. The door opened behind her. She stepped out slowly. The corridor outside felt normal again. But it didn't feel the same to her anymore. Because now she knew something important. She was not just being trained. She was being studied as something the system could not fully understand. And anything that could not be understood in a place like this would eventually be either controlled or removed. She returned to her dorm, but sleep did not come easily that night. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she thought about what she was becoming. Not stronger, not faster, something harder to define, something that did not follow rules as easily as others. And far above her, in the silent systems of the station, new alerts continued to update her file. Not warnings, not failures, just rising complexity markers, increasing unpredictability score, and one final note added quietly to the deepest level of her record. If escalation continues, standard student classification may no longer apply.